Hey guys, Seth here, registered dietitian, and today I'm going to be reacting to and reviewing Mike Mentzer's book, Heavy Duty Nutrition. This is Mike's take on nutrition for bodybuilding, so I'm curious what he has to say. Let's dive in and see. You can see it's not a very long book. It's only about 14 pages, so it's kind of short, abbreviated, and to the point, much like his training style. So Mike kind of starts off the book saying how he was deluded and confused by the bodybuilding magazines, and how he could become Mr. America overnight if he just took a certain product. And I think this book was written a few decades ago, and that sentiment still rings true today. So kind of a funny story Mike starts off with. A common mistake a lot of bodybuilders make. He tried to bulk up. He went from 180 pounds to 250 pounds in just 7 months. So that's about 10 pounds a month, and that's going to be mostly fat gain. And he did it. He was drinking 2 gallons of milk every single day. And the only reason that he stopped is because his dad wouldn't buy him any more clothes for his wardrobe that wouldn't fit anymore. So kind of an important lesson here. He spent the next 6 months trying to undo the changes and get rid of all the fat that he gained. By the time he cut back down, he was actually less than the 180 pounds he began with. So in section 4 of this book, Mike starts talking about the nutrition for building lean muscle. Mike notes that fat contains almost 6 times as many calories as equal to amount of muscle, and of course that's because muscle is mostly water, fat is mostly lipids, and lipids are high in caloric value. And Mike kind of illustrates that down here. You can see the percentages. So Mike talks about figuring out what your BMR is, or your basal metabolic rate, the formula that you need to figure out how many calories you should consume every day. He has kind of an oversimplified formula here, so this doesn't describe how many calories he expends with daily volume of activity levels. Typically we use a formula called Mifflin-St. To figure this out. This is the formula you'll find if you type in BMR calculator on the internet. They're actually using this Mifflin-St. equation. And he also says you can just write down everything you eat for 3 days and also weigh yourself and see, hey, did I gain any weight or lose any weight when I'm eating this number of calories? And that'll kind of give you an idea of where your metabolism is at and how many calories you're burning. One downside to that approach would be that weight can be influenced by many other factors aside from just activity level and calorie intake. You can have hormonal fluctuations, fluid fluctuations, all sorts of things can influence your body weight, so that may not be the most accurate way to go about it. You don't want to use a formula, you can try something like that. So here Mike kind of gives his macronutrient recommendations, 60% carbohydrate, 25% protein, and 15% fat. And Mike's getting these figures from the recommended dietary allowances, or the RDAs. We still use these today. So this is really interesting here. Mike says that since bodybuilders weigh more than the average person and they're more active, they need more calories, carbohydrates, and thiamine, B vitamin. Thiamine is actually vitamin B1. And yeah, thiamine or vitamin B1 is probably the most important vitamin when it comes to carbohydrate metabolism. So if you're consuming a lot of carbohydrates, vitamin B1 is pretty important. It's seen in carbohydrate foods naturally. One consideration though is if you're eating more refined or processed carbohydrates that aren't whole food sources, it might be devoid of these nutrients. So that would be something to consider if you're thinking about supplementing, or if you need to supplement. And so Mike here is just kind of talking about the food groups: cereal and grains, fruits, vegetables, high protein, milk groups. So what I'm kind of seeing here is that Mike is really just recommending a balanced diet. He's not recommending that you completely exclude certain food groups or you overemphasize any. Really, it's just about getting a variety of nutrients in your diet. So I thought this was a really interesting point to highlight. Mike is talking about the protein sparing effect of glucose, and he says when we don't take in enough sugar through our diet to fuel muscular contractions, our bodies transform the amino acid alanine derived from ingested protein or our own muscle tissue into glucose. So carbohydrates have a protein sparing effect. Our bodies utilize something called the alanine cycle to convert amino acids into glucose, specifically the amino acid alanine, but your body will liberate your own protein tissue to convert that alanine into glucose if it needs to, and if it's not getting enough glucose from the diet. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Yeah, so Mike is just kind of going over some basic fat loss math here, but really back when he wrote this book, this wasn't as common, right? This people didn't know about this stuff as much. He's talking about how if your daily caloric needs are 3,000 per day, if you drop down to 2,500, you'll essentially lose 1 pound of fat per week, because 500 times 7 equals 3,500. 3,500 calories are in a pound of fat. Another interesting part here, and again this rings true, if you go under 1,200 calories per day, and this usually is just for females, it's really challenging to get the micronutrients that you need in your diet when you're eating less than 1,200 calories a day, which can lead to a variety of problems. Very intelligently, Mike recommends to compensate by burning more calories through exercise, as opposed to dropping your calorie level even lower, under 1,200. So this may be the most interesting part of the book for me, this little section here. He mentions that the last 2 weeks before the 79 Olympia, he was consuming more than 200 grams of carbs a day. He had pancakes 3 times a week and ice cream almost every single day. However, he kept his caloric intake below 2,000 and was very accurate. Mike was maybe one of the first people to really implement a if it fits your macros approach to dieting at the Olympia level, at a very high level. He took a very flexible approach. He was eating ice cream, he was eating pancakes, but he tracked his calorie intake, so he knew exactly what his energy balance was, and he knew how many calories he needed to lose fat. So Mike was kind of maybe a forerunner for this trend that you see popularized by people like Lane Norton and Alan Aragon today. But Mike was doing this back in 1979, so that to me is really, really interesting. Yeah, so overall, I think Mike was really ahead of his time when it came to nutrition. He was talking about concepts like flexible dieting and having a balanced diet of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins well before this became kind of a mainstream approach or idea by a lot of bodybuilders. So kudos to Mike for being a forerunner. And if you enjoy this kind of content, guys, feel free to subscribe and like the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.